Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
It's Dr. Mike Patterson, your host of the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about what it takes to be a great leader and how to build a great team. I'm excited to talk with my guest today because my guest today is my friend, Dr. Jenn Guignard. She is a leadership professor and an executive mindfulness coach. Not only does she have an MBA and a doctorate in organizational leadership, but she has studied meditation and mindfulness for 20 years. She's taught thousands of students at the university level and thousands more at Fortune 500 companies as an executive coach and a corporate trainer. And she had her own very successful corporate career in corporate America. Her passion, however, is helping others develop their leadership skills so that they can thrive in their careers. So again, in full disclosure, I've known Jenn for about 15 years. We were classmates at one time, and now we're colleagues teaching in the same graduate program. We've also collaborated on something I'm really excited about, and that's the Mission First People Always e-learning experience. It's e-learning that brings the ideas from the Mission First People Always book to life through video and interactive activities. And that will be available by the time this episode airs. Jenn, welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we're going to talk about mindful leadership. Welcome.
So much, Mike. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you. We've got a lot to talk about today. But we're going to focus first on this idea of mindful leadership, its benefits and its practices. I'm excited about this topic because I think it's going to help me personally. I'm one of those guys that goes about 100 miles an hour for 10 or 12 hours a day, and I'm trying to get as much crammed into the day as possible. I love to check things off my to-do list and mark through those items and feel like I'm making progress throughout the day. And then I drop on the sofa or into bed, absolutely exhausted, and I'm done. So it's really difficult for me to slow down and think. I'd rather do. So I think this episode is right up my alley. So let's start with a basic question. What is mindfulness and why is it suddenly so popular?
Great question, Mike. Well, first of all, mindfulness in itself is simply our sheer human ability to be fully present and aware of where we are and what we're doing in that moment. So you talked a lot about multitasking and going 100 miles an hour. I was like that too. And that's actually what led me to look for a solution because like you mentioned, I was getting burnt out. I was collapsing at 7 o'clock at night because I was so tired of multitasking. But there's also a second part to that. And the second part of the mindfulness aspect is that when we practice this idea of being focused and present in the moment, it results in a higher level of self-awareness where we're not just overly reacting. We don't become as easily overwhelmed with what's going on around us. We're able to better maintain our composure.
Yeah, you used a term that I want you to unpack for us a little bit here. Being fully present. I mean, are we fully present with one another as we have this conversation, or is that something that I determine, you determine? How do we know if we're fully present?
Great question. So I believe that you and I are fully present right now. We're being recorded. There's a lot of pressure to really focus and listen to one another. But unfortunately, that's usually not the case. When we go about our daily lives, we're oftentimes multitasking, right? Someone is talking and you're thinking about, I'm hungry. What am I going to make for dinner, right? When we're at work, we tend to be worrying about what's going on at home. When we're at home, we start worrying about what's going on at work. And so that would be examples of how we are not mindful, where our body is in one place and our mind is somewhere else. And what's happening is that these amazing technological advances are further exasperating our tendency to have our mind wander because it's so engaging, right? We have this little powerful computer in our pocket with all sorts of cool, interesting things going on. And we check it and then we just go down a rabbit hole and we forget what we were doing, and then we go back to what we're doing, and that's why we're getting so exhausted, because we're getting spread too thin.
So how does this idea of mindfulness impact employees and the organization? When you were just describing, the always at the ready distraction device called our smartphone, images of being in meetings with people and having them look down and constantly check their phone and respond to a quick text and then refer back to the conversation we're having in the room. I mean, that's just such a vivid image for me. What's the impact on our teams and the culture of the organization if we operate like that versus the benefits, or how if we plug in more mindfully?
Excellent question. Again, yes, I think we've all been in those meetings, right? When someone suddenly snaps out of it, looks up and says, huh, and asks a question that's already been addressed. And it doesn't just happen at work, it happens at dinner with friends, right? So the same thing, someone will look down, reach at their phone, and then, they're gone for a few minutes. And that is taking, number one, it's twofold. To answer your question, it's twofold. One, it's taking a toll on the individual, right? It's leading to being disengaged in whatever you are supposed to be doing. And when you're disengaged, you become dissatisfied. So if I'm at work, instead of really letting myself get into the flow of a project, of whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm constantly checking my phone, constantly, being distracted. And then I come home and I say, that was a terrible day at work. I'm so dissatisfied at work. Well, why am I dissatisfied? Because I'm not giving it the chance, right? It's not going to become good or exciting or intriguing if I don't give it the opportunity to get to that point. So for the individual themselves, it's taking a health toll, and it's really hurting our sense of satisfaction. It's the same thing with relationships, right? If I even personal relationships, right? I say, oh, my kids I never see them. They don't talk to me. Well, that's because when I go pick up my kid, I'm on the phone, I'm driving them home. Instead of asking them how was their day, right? I'm on the phone with somebody else. So again, it's this multitasking that's getting us tired. So that's the first step. The second step is this idea of being mindful brings us composure, calm, and focus, right? When we are not those things, what are the opposite things, right? We're frantic, we're moody, we get upset easily, we start to focus on something else. And so we're falling behind. You're running down the hall to a meeting because you're running late. And what do your employees see? They see you disheveled, frantic, upset, moody, right? And so that impacts them, because if they're in a role where they aspire to promote to the position that you currently have, they're going to be like, I don't want that job. That guy's a mess, right? Why would I want that? And then they start to think, well, I need to go to another organization so that I can pursue, better growth opportunities that I'll enjoy. So it is having an impact, not just on the individual and the leader, but on the perception. Because as leaders, people are watching us, whether we think they are or not. They're receiving that energy. And we want to be, just like want to be polished for our customers, we want to be polished for our engagement and our interactions with our very own employees. And actually, this sort of reminds me a little bit about the idea of mission first. managers and leaders who are frantic, right? Juggling, it's clearly unstable. They're perceived as being less competent. And they're perceived as being less effective leaders because it's like, oh, this guy is a mess. If he can't get to a meeting on time because he's so distracted, then what else is, what other balls is he dropping? Does that make sense?
It does. And as you were describing that, and thanks for mentioning the mission first, people always aspect of this conversation. But on the people side of things, it seems that, and the word that jumps out to me is disrespectful. I mean, if I'm distracted, I'm on my phone, I'm trying to finish one conversation, and I'm also in the middle of a conversation with you, or trying to start my time with you, my meeting with you, or I'm looking at my phone while you're trying to share something with me, it just seems terribly disrespectful to you, the person I'm supposed to be focused on. What are your thoughts about that? Is there a relational impact here as well?
Absolutely. Because one of the common reasons that people leave their jobs is because they don't feel valued, and they don't feel valued or connected to their manager, to their direct supervisor. So if you and I are having a conversation and you're like, wait, hold on, like we're going to have to finish this another time, right? What does that tell me? It tells me that I'm not as important as something else, right? And if you
Yep.
are constantly demonstrating that I'm not important, that's what I'm going to believe. And, one of the main things that I think I'm really passionate about communicating to people, to leaders about mindfulness is that it's not a woo-woo mystical, right, thing. We have been, thanks to Daniel Goleman, we have been talking about in the workplace about emotional intelligence. And the facets of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-regulation, right? Empathy, social skills. The last one is motivation. But we've been talking about the importance of being emotionally intelligent, but we really, and in my years, I mean, I spent so much time training, right, on emotional intelligence, but we never really taught, not very much, what that was and what that looks like and what are the strategies for enhancing our self-awareness, our self-regulation, and our empathy.
And I want to get to how you do mindfulness. I always want to talk about application, but I'm also struck, we were earlier, a moment ago, we were talking about the smartphone in our hands always being a ready source of distraction. Is the smartphone the root of all evil when it comes to a lack of mindfulness? I mean, is the answer, Jenn, for everybody to take their smartphone and throw it out and just not use that wonderful resource we have? Is that the answer?
I don't think it is. We've been distracted for many, many years, right? It used to be the newspaper, right? At the dinner table, you have this old image, of the dad reading the sports section, right? He's disengaged. He's, not paying attention to the kids, the mom's doing anything, right? You have this sort of picture of what it looks like when we become disengaged and sort of escape. So the phone does that, but it's not the technology's fault. The difference is there's only a certain number of pages in the newspaper, right? There's only a certain number of pages in a women's magazine, right? To go back to that old cliche of the 50s. The thing is about the phone, it never ends. It never, ever ends, right? And so the key is we don't want to be a slave to the phone or to technology, and we don't want to turn into zombies. And it doesn't have to be the phone, right? All of these modern conveniences, these wonderful things that enhance our life, right? Like live streaming of TV, video games, right? The problem with that is it doesn't end. It never ends. And so we grow addicted to it. So my recommendation is to really take a step back and really consciously reflect on what are the triggers? What are the things that are really causing you the greatest distraction? And then you can devise strategies for moderating that. So on your phone, right, you can check to see how many hours were you on social media. Well, if you're on the phone for 2 hours after dinner, well, you know what? That's okay. But if I look at my phone and I am checking Instagram, right, every hour for 10 minutes, when I'm supposed to be doing something else during those hours, then that's a problem. And so we really need to get honest with ourselves about and make a commitment to ourselves and to our loved ones and to our team and to our organization to be present and to have the awareness of what is triggering us.
So, uh, give us some practical tips for becoming more mindful. You just shared to become more conscious of how much time we're spending on devices and plugged into things that distract us. But what can we do proactively to become more mindful?
Sure. So we want to get in the habit when we're doing something and we stop and go to do something else to become aware of that. And according to Harvard business researchers, right, there's three specific areas of mastery that allow leaders to be more present and thoughtful. The first one is this ability to take a step back and observe at a distance what is happening around you, right? If you're in a meeting, we need to get, and again, it's this emotional intelligence piece, right? We need to become aware who's doing most of the talking. Is it me? Who is not talking, right? And what am I doing on autopilot? So, this idea of taking a step back and observing, right? We call that metacognition. It's this reflective piece. And unfortunately, I think our society has grown to fear reflection, right? We might not like what we see. So, we need to have the courage to be honest and to have that honest reflection. The second thing is in the study of meditation, we call it without judgment. In Harvard business research, they call it allowing. And what this means is that when we take that step back to observe, that we do so without criticism. Okay, that's what we mean without judgment. We're really just taking a neutral step back and objectively observing what's really happening without taking a side, right? Of I'm right, they're wrong, right? So we need, and that also goes back to the non-judgment goes back to self, right? When we reflect on how we're doing, we don't want to get into the point where we say, oh my goodness, I'm my phone says I'm on the phone, 12 hours a day. This is so upsetting. And we can't we really have to protect our emotional vulnerability, right? With the sense that the purpose of this is to become better. And then the last piece, the third piece, is to increase what we would call curiosity, right? Curiosity means inquisitive, right? That idea of, right? We're going to stop and actually, now that I've observed what's happening, right? I want to do so with a sense of how can I learn from this? How can I embrace the opportunity to gather as much information as possible before I make a decision? And that goes again back to what those traits that we don't like about our boss, right? Who's really tired and cranky and makes hasty decisions, right? We want them to take a step back and ask us questions and really do an investigation of what's the information out there and what's the best course of action.
So, Jenn, and I appreciate those three steps. And what caught my attention, and as you were describing it, I got this image in my mind that I think you helped me correct. When I hear the word reflection, I think of, oh, you got to go away, you got to sit on a rock and put your chin on your fist like the great thinker and contemplate, the meaning of life. But that's not exactly what you describe in the context of a meeting. So maybe you could just unpack those three ideas a little bit in the context of work. Maybe it's in the context of a meeting. What would it look like for a manager to apply those 3 steps on Monday morning or on Monday afternoon at work? Help us put some boots in the mud on that one and put it to work for it, those ideas to work for us.
Sure, sure. So again, it's this rushing and multitasking that doesn't allow us the opportunity to transition from one thing to the next, right? How many of us are double booked, overbooked, right? And we're like, oh, that's okay. I'll just be 15 minutes late to my next meeting, right? When we do that, we close the door for the opportunity to pause. So we need to be purposeful in inserting moments of pause, right? Whether it's and this is another thing I see a lot. Walk with me. I'm going to the next meeting. Walk with me and we talk about the problem, right? We need to try to reduce that drive to multitask and fill every minute. So the first component is time management, really from a leadership perspective and from a business perspective, right? Time management. Are we building in time for pause? All right. The other thing that is really a tip that people often talk about is, every time you wash your hands, you want to take 3 deep breaths and allow your heart rate to come down. And that one really resonates with me because I remember working in an office and I would literally run. I'd be, going from one meeting to the next and being like, I have to use the restroom. I'm running. I'll be right there. Right. That running, doesn't allow us the opportunity to pause. And so with regards to a meeting, right, instead of starting a meeting with, here's the agenda and here, let me start off the first thing, right? Maybe we could change that and start off with, we're here for a meeting. Before we start, does anyone have, something to say? And so now we're, again, putting other people first. We have our mission, right? We're coming in with an agenda, but it's no longer this drive, but rather an openness to also listen. And so the more that you can build in these opportunities of pause and opportunities to listen to your people, I think the more it becomes a practice to do so.
I love those practical tips. And so let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Is it good? It sounds like what you're saying is good to block some time on your calendar. And I hear this from a lot of folks. Some of my clients and colleagues will say other people have access to my calendar and they just schedule me into meetings throughout the day. And it creates this going from one meeting to the next life that I have to live every day at work because other people are jumping on my calendar and pulling me into stuff. So what's the response, Jen? Do we just block out quiet time in our day, or do we block 15 or 30 minutes between meetings to give us that chance to reflect and sort of unpack what we just experienced and prepare for what's next? What do you think?
I do think that a 30-minute break in between meetings is ideal. The other thing too is lunch, right? I'm a believer that we should respect the lunch hour. And otherwise, we walk in the office and our level of stress and anxiety and energy just goes up, 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 up. Through lunch, it's up, 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 right? Lunch is there and breaks are there for a reason. And, as managers and leaders, we're not hourly employees. We're not punching out for breaks. I don't know any salaried person that takes a break ever, right? And the law was made because we need that break. So yes, I would definitely block off the lunch hour, whether that's 11 to 12, 12 to 1, 11:30 to 12:30, whatever that looks like for you. And as much as possible, try to maintain 30-minute breaks in between meetings so that you have, if one meeting goes over 15 minutes, you still have a couple minutes to get to the next. With regards to actually having a moment to yourself, like a bigger chunk of a moment, I think it's important for mental health that we do that for ourselves. So some people do it at 6 a.m. in the morning, right? Some people do it at 10 p.m. at night. Whatever that time is for you, that works for you, we need to schedule that mental health sort of rebuilding, restoration, I think is the word I'm looking for, restoration time throughout our day. We should not be running from 6 a.m. until we drop unconscious on the couch at 8.
So here's probably a reflection of my personality. I want to know, what should I be thinking about during my restoration moment? Because I always want to be productive. Always want to be moving the ball down the field, so to speak. So when I'm restoring my mind, what should I be doing? What should I be thinking about?
Well, one thing with the workplace is, if we come out of an intense meeting and we go into another meeting that should be friendly, what happens? We bring that anger, that tension with us to the next meeting. So reflecting on that previous meeting, how do I feel about what happened? If I feel tension, why am I feeling tension? What was, right? It's that curiosity, that inquisitiveness, right? Why am I feeling upset about this? Well, I'm really upset because this person said this thing that was really kind of an insult to me. I was kind of offended by what they said. So then you bring this awareness of, okay, I'm feeling a little bit upset. This is why I'm feeling a little bit upset. And then I can work through the problem, right? That person probably didn't mean anything by it. I'm going to take a few deep breaths and try to forget about that, put that to the side for now before I walk into this next meeting. And this next meeting, I'm really excited, right? I'm going to see my friend Mike. In this next meeting, Mike and I are going to talk about a new project. And I really want to, bring my best self to that. I don't want to bring my cranky self to that. And so we walk ourselves through this adjustment in our mental attitude and our mindset.
Is all this, Jen, easier to do or harder to do now that so many folks are working remotely these days? And, with it seems like we just can't catch a break with COVID. Once we feel like we're coming out of this dark tunnel. We get shoved back in the dark tunnel with Omicron or whatever will come next. And so many folks are still working from home, or we tried to be in the office a little bit. Now got sent home. We're not sure what's going to happen next. Is it easier or harder to be mindful working from home?
It depends on your home. It depends on your home and your living situation. We know that the pandemic has taken a huge toll on women. Of course, my other topic of interest is women leaders. So I'm going to have to plug that in here. But we know that women employees tend to have a higher emotional home labor. And so there's this temptation, to run and do the laundry really quick before my next Zoom starts. And so it takes a lot of discipline. At work, traditionally, you had less distractions. But again, now with, the phone and other technology, that the balance is less drastic. It used to be a lot less distractions at work. I think that now it's not as few distractions. But it does definitely depend on your home atmosphere. It also depends on your personal sense of discipline. For me, I've worked from home for 20 years and I'm not a night person. I try to be at my desk at 7 a.m. and I want to be done by 4 or 5 p.m. Right. And so I don't multitask during the day. I don't do home chores during the day. But for most people, it's very hard. And the temptation is there. I'll just run and do this, and then I'll just run and do that. And so, yes, I do believe that at home, there is a propensity for greater distraction and greater multitasking.
I know many of my listeners are managers, leaders of teams, and they're always thinking about becoming a better leader. And that's why they've plugged in the podcast. But there's also some folks who are listening who don't have direct reports. They're not managers. They're not supervisors. They're individual contributors. Maybe they're preparing for that first management position. They're going to be a big time leader someday. But right now, they're an individual contributor. They're a member of a team. How can mindfulness help that person?
Sure. So one thing, oh gosh, and I always hesitate, as you know, we teach leadership, and it just breaks my heart when I hear someone say, well, I'm not a leader. I'm like, what does that mean? And what they're saying is, I don't have direct reports.
Right.
So, two things. One, I believe that if you're listening to this podcast, you likely are a leader. You might not have direct reports, but you are a leader. And so you want to start practicing, especially if you aspire to have direct reports and aspire to promote, you want to develop these healthy habits, right? These habits that are going to allow you to succeed when you get to that level. So often I work with people who are just like, I hate my job. I need a new job. If only I worked at, fill in the blank, I would be so fulfilled with my career. Well, they get that job. And guess what? They're not fulfilled, right? Because it's just the same toxic habits that we bring with us. And as individuals of an organization, we all contribute to the psychological capital of the organization, right? The psychological capital of the organization refers to that environment, right? Whether it's a positive environment or it's a not so positive environment. Mike, you could probably relate to this. As a corporate trainer, I would walk into I don't know how many different organizations. And the moment I walked in and I spoke to that receptionist, I could feel what kind of environment that organization was. Was it a positive psychological capital environment, or was it a negative? And so we're part of an organization, we're part of a community, we all contribute to that. So there's really, the research says that there's 4 components to psychological capital. The first one is hope, right? Hope is defined as a positive motivational state with regards to our goals, right? Our objectives and the pathways to get there. So as an individual contributor, I want to bring in and promote a positive motivational state, right? If I come in saying, why bother? We're doomed, especially right now, right? Things are rough. Then everyone, that feeling is contagious. Why bother? We're doomed. And that just, number one, it affects others. And number two, it affects myself, right? My satisfaction at work. The second element is optimism, right? We want to expect that good things will come, right? That we are approaching problems with a sense of confidence that we have the personal ability to overcome the challenge. And then self-efficacy, right? If we practice mindfulness and we have good self-awareness, then our self-efficacy improves, right? And that's the confidence and the belief that we can accomplish something effectively. And that's what causes a lot of job dissatisfaction, is people feel not competent in their job. Their boss makes them feel they're not competent in their job, or their colleagues or coworkers makes them feel like they're not good enough. And that promotes dissatisfaction in the workplace. So having the confidence that I can do my job at an appropriate level is really important. And then finally, the fourth thing is resilience, right? When we're mindfulness and self-aware and we don't let the negativity take a toll on us, then we're more likely to bounce back from adversity and challenges. And that's so important right now, because we are in organizations, we are facing more challenges than ever. And it's gone on for a long time. And the longer periods of challenges, the greater toll that our resilience takes.
Jenn, is psychological capital what drives organizational culture, or does organizational culture drive psychological capital? How are the two terms similar, different? Are they connected? I love this term, psychological capital. It's not widely used. We tend to use the word corporate culture. What's the difference, or is there a difference, and how are they connected?
Well, the psychological capital is the emotional aspect of org culture. Org culture is bigger than that. We tend to, again, because the psychology impacts our satisfaction, we tend to focus on that a lot when we talk about org culture. But org culture is bigger than that, right? It's all of the unwritten rules that we follow. And this positive and negative tone within the workplace is just one aspect of it.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's very helpful. So, Jenn, this is the time in the show, the episode where I usually invite my guests to plug something they're doing, their podcast, their product, their upcoming speaking gig or book or whatever they have. But we have something we've done together that we want to talk about a little bit here before we go today. And that's the e-learning course that you and I created, and more so you created the e-learning course because that's your expertise, that was designed to complement my book, Mission First, People Always, the definitive guide to balancing people and performance. But you created this e-learning course. Tell our listeners a little bit about it and why they might want to check it out.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am so proud of our work. And I'll take a step back to say that the way that you and I sort of connected on this endeavor was because I just loved your book. And the concepts of mission first, people always, I think, is so important, especially in the chaotic world that we're operating now, right? It's so easy to become distracted. You actually talk about this on a bigger scale in the book, right? That without clarity of our mission, we don't know where we're going. And so we will not go where we want to go. So I love the e-learning module because for those who are interested in learning these important concepts to help them succeed in the workplace today, it's such an easy way to do it. It's an enjoyable way to do it. I think it goes fast. And the thing that I love too is that it's not just, unlike maybe when you're reading a book, you're not just reading concept, right? There's moments of pause. Actually, your book is designed very mindfully, right? Within your book, there is moments of reflection and prompts to reflect on how these concepts relate to you and how these strategies relate to you and how you can implement the strategies. So I would say that the e-learning module is really an active plan, right? A plan to take action. And that's sort of the differentiation between other e-learning modules and this one is that, yes, it's an e-learning module, but it's also an opportunity to make action plans. And so often we read a book and we think, this is so great, I should really do this, but then we don't.
Right.
With the e-learning module, it gives you that nudge that we need to actually force ourselves to sit down and reflect and develop strategies that will improve our performance at work.
Also in the e-learning, and you help pull these out for us in the e-learning. They're there in the book, but maybe more subtly presented in the book. You've highlighted them in the e-learning approach, but I believe there's 9 practices of a mission first, people always leader that we highlight. Say just a little bit about those 9 practices.
Sure. Well, a lot of times it's sort of like what I mentioned here with the mindfulness, right? We talk about emotional intelligence. We need emotional intelligence, right?
But how do we do it?
What is that? But how do we do it? No, it's a father to tell us how to do it. And so the great thing about the book, and I won't give any spoilers, but the great thing about the book is that it identifies very specific, understandable, easy, relatable. I shouldn't say easy because nothing is easy, right? It's simple actions that we should be taking. And it really allows us the opportunity to evaluate, is this something that I'm currently doing? Oh my goodness, I've never thought to do this, right? And so it's sort of provides a self-assessment of our current leadership and a checklist, really, to help us. And that section of the module really concentrates on our engagement with others, right? That people always piece. So I think it's if this idea of mindfulness is interesting to you, I think that the e-learning module really helps to facilitate that idea of, I'm going to walk through these modules and I'm sort of going down this path or staircase of steps that I can do to in a concrete way apply these concepts to my life personally and to my team. And that's the other thing that I really love about the book, is that you're looking at these concepts from two different lenses. One, from the leader perspective, the leader or supervisor perspective, and two, from the individual perspective, right? From the enhancing of our own personal leadership. And I think that's really important.
I love it. You can learn more about this awesome e-learning course that Jenn has created on missionfirstpeoplealwaysbook.com or on my website, drmikepatterson.com. Jenn, you've been a great guest, very informative. I want to have you back. But for now, how can people connect with you on social media? They want to kind of follow your ideas and your path and your journey. How can they connect with you?
Thanks, Mike. You can find me on Instagram at Leading Mindful, just like it sounds, one word, Leading Mindful. And thank you so much for having me. It was so fun. I think you and I could talk forever. So I would love to come back another time. And thank you again. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, it's been our pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this episode of the Mission First People Always podcast. Please join me next time for another great conversation about what it takes to be a great leader and build a great team.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.